to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 80. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
But that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today, we're talking to Nichole. Nichole works in communications in the Seattle area for a nonprofit that I happen to also work for. Welcome, Nichole.
Thank you.
Yay. I was just telling Ryan before we started recording, it's funny that we've worked together for over a month now, but it's mainly been remote. And so that's been, like, okay, eventually we'll get to know each other more. And then Nichole is new to Seattle, like, ever. And so I've been teasing her that, like, her big experience in Seattle is just going to be like the great indoors and, reading and
that's
things
not
like that.
that different from normal. Although I will say the weather that we've been having since we've been in the great indoors is not typical.
Yeah, it's a lovely spring.
We've had a very, very mild, not very wet spring, which is not particularly normal. So don't get too used to it.
Okay, well, I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, it has been very
Stop
nice.
enjoying it.
Cheryl knows that I'm living in a basement right now, which it's a very nice basement, but having the sun outside is very nice for being able to get out a bit since I can't explore.
Yeah. So where did you move here from?
I moved here most recently from Belfast in Northern Ireland.
Oh, awesome. And how long were you living there?
I lived there for a little over 2 years. I was doing my master's degree, so I was a student, which was pretty fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just in Belfast last summer, so we did a kind of a trip around the perimeter of the entire island. So we did both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Nice,
beautiful and gorgeous, and I loved it, and I would totally go back.
Yeah, it's a magical place.
Yep.
Since we're not actually going to talk about Belfast as our subject today, I would just love to hear real quick, like a couple things you'd recommend to listeners if they're going to travel there.
Well, doing the coastal route is a brilliant idea. It's incredibly beautiful and diverse. The scenery changes, so that's really fun. And then making sure you go to some off the beaten trail pubs, because those are always full of character and fun. So if you want to find the personality of a place, especially one that's burning a peat fire, that's as good as it can be. Yeah, burning peat. It has a wonderful smell. Yeah. It's the
Is
earth.
that a common thing?
In remote places. Yeah. Peat fires.
Like, do they do it to keep warm, or like, what's the purpose?
Yeah. So it's largely to keep warm. You know, why the reason people build fires usually. But in a lot of Ireland, they have the same reasons as us. But
okay,
trees
cool.
can
They're
be
humans.
scarce
Got
in
it. Got
certain
it.
parts. Yeah, so people have found that they can burn the earth. So yeah, so peat fires.
Interesting. I have never had the pleasure. Man, I got to check that out.
Add it to your list, Cheryl.
Add it to the list.
Okay, Nichole. So we've got a set of 3 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. And the first one is, why do you travel?
I travel for lots of reasons. I think it's one of the funnest things you can do is just experiencing new things. We live in a really beautiful, incredible planet that's very diverse. So just the opportunity to see more of it is one great reason. But I also love to travel because I love the way it just widens my worldview and gives me new perspective. I think if you do it in the right way, traveling can give you a lot of humility and temper cultural arrogance you could have just by seeing the way different people do things. So I just love the way it shapes my perspective in a positive way, I think.
Nice. So what is the right way then?
Speaking of cultural arrogance.
Hey, Cheryl, be nice.
The right way to travel. I guess I'm getting at humility. So going to a place with the idea of being a student, I guess. So you could go to a place and come with your opinions of how things are supposed to be and kind of write off what you see if it doesn't match with what you're used to. But I guess going with a willingness to learn and to see things from a different perspective is what I was getting at.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good perspective. I like, it's not easy to be humble. And I don't know that our culture in the United States necessarily easily encourages or breeds humility just in general. But I think that is a really good thing to keep in mind when going to another culture, whether that's in another country or in another city or another family or whatever. I think that's a really good perspective. It's a very healthy perspective.
I like your idea of seeing yourself as a student when you travel. I'm trying to figure out how I see myself when I travel. And I think one of the ways might be a collector, because I do like checking things off of a list. And then that
just sounds so creepy, Cheryl.
I mean, yeah. And then it reminds me like of Professor Slughorn in Harry Potter, like how he doesn't really want experiences or relationships. He just wants to collect things and like be able to claim things. And that makes me, I've questioned myself over time. Like, did I do that because I wanted the photo, or did I do it because I wanted like to experience that? So it's just like, I think it is a good question for me to ask myself, at least, is like, why, like, what's my purpose? And is it just like to check it off the list or to put the pin in the map? Or is it like because it was meaningful and I learned something? So, yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Or because you're creepy and want to collect people.
No, I don't want to collect people. I do like collecting friends, though, so I don't know if that crosses over.
I rest my case. Let's move to the next question. So, Nichole, what type of traveler are you?
Oh, I'm a light packer. A lot of that, I think, is from living in Europe, and a lot of the cheap flights that you could have for 10 pounds or 15 pounds, like you could only take a backpack on. So traveling light was very conducive to getting around. And I think it's helpful to go to a place like with a few things you want to see, but I also am not married to a plan. So I tend to like to be flexible, but with some goals. I'm a relaxed traveler, I think.
Nice. So when you say you go in with goals, are those goals things to see or to do or to eat, or are they more kind of abstract as a type of experience that you want to have?
I guess all of the above. And when you go to a different place, it tends to offer different things based on where you're going. So if you're going to a city, if you're going to Paris, you probably want to see the Louvre. Or if you're going to a tiny town in Ireland, it's not going to have the Louvre. So going on a hiking trail or to a fun restaurant. So
yeah, that makes
sense.
Nice.
All right. So we are fellow light packers, and I want to know what's like a good light packing tip that you have.
Well, I've joined the the hipster barefoot shoes movement. So I really like Vivo barefoot shoes, which take up hardly any
What is a
space.
barefoot shoe?
Oh boy. Are those like the weird toe shoes?
Those are a kind of them. I think those are the Vibram 5-finger ones. I don't have those. I have a different kind. They don't really look that different from normal shoes, but they just pack really easily and they're light. So so I don't like my shoes taking up much space.
How do they do for walking though? If you're doing a lot of walking?
Oh, they're great.
They have a lot of
I really
support?
like them. Well, that's the thing about barefoot shoes is they don't have support. So it takes a while to get used to them, and then you get used to them. And I at least really like them. So
do they not have soles, or is it just that they give your foot the freedom to feel like you're barefoot?
I mean, they have soles, but they don't have arch support. It's basically just a sole, so your foot's like on the ground except for a piece of rubber, pretty much. I'm not selling these very well. I really like them, though. So they've done great for my travel experiences.
Well, they're not cheap, though. I guess shoes are not cheap. I guess I take it back. These are the same cost as most shoes. I just don't like to pay this much for shoes.
It's true. They are expensive, but they last, like mine have lasted me for 2 years. So and I run about every day. So if you have usual running shoes, you have to replace them.
So they're
more
your
often.
everyday shoes as well as your travel shoes then?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So you run in them every day and you wear them every day, and they've lasted you 2 years so far.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're a great thing.
Awesome. That's good. I mean, finding a good pair of shoes is worth the money sometimes. So
yeah. But it sounds like this is not the sort of thing to get, a week or two before you leave and wear around the house and then go walk in Europe for, all day long for 10 days.
No, you probably want to have broken them in and gotten used to it for, I don't know, several weeks, maybe a month. So otherwise you could get shin splints or you could be very unhappy. So
yes.
I've been moving in the opposite direction and just got more arch support for my shoes. So I could see that being a tough transition.
Yeah, I was having knee trouble when I was running. So I was starting to research that. And this is what a lot of people have gone to. So I know this isn't a podcast about shoes, but
no,
I do bring
that's
those.
fine though. It's always really interesting to hear like what different people just like travel with, and how similar is that to your everyday life, or do you depart from your everyday life and how you pack? And so I think my shoe solution is only just bring one pair of shoes, and then you don't have to pack any shoes because you're wearing them. But sometimes I do too. So
yeah, but see, then there's the part of me that like I pretty much only wear one pair of shoes. So just packing one pair of shoes is pretty easy because that's what I normally do.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true.
But I'm not a shoe person. So there you go.
I'm just glad to hear you don't wear the ones with the toe finger things, because those look a little creepy to me. So
you like me less. No
she
toe fingers.
Will definitely be silently judging you.
Well, good. I'm glad I avoided that one.
All right, so we got one final question before we launch into your travel story, and it might be related to what you've already talked about a little bit, but I think we can probably go broader. And that's, what's your number one travel tip? So you kind of already gave us a tip around shoes as far as packing, but travel altogether, what's your number one travel tip?
I guess I would go back to what I said earlier about having an open perspective and being willing to try new things. So just the frame of mind you go in with. I know, going to a new place and trying a lot of different foods can sometimes be risky, especially if you're going to places where people might not have as much access to clean water. But I always love trying as much food as possible and doing as many local experiences as I can. So just being kind of game for anything, I think tends to create the best travel experience in my mind. I also love researching a place when possible.
I don't know if Cheryl would agree with the food, though.
No.
I want all of the
I don't know
food.
how well you know Cheryl yet, but she
always.
really doesn't care about food.
Oh,
It's not
right.
really important to her.
food. Oh man. Sometimes this just becomes more of a food podcast, and then Ryan resists. So that's why this is not just a food podcast.
Well, I always get kind of sad when people will travel with like their granola bars and Pop-Tarts and chocolates and I don't know, and not get to taste the country they're in or even the city if it's not that drastically different. So
I mean, I do travel with my granola bars, but that doesn't keep me from eating food that's there. That's just kind of my backup if I can't find something or if I'm out hiking or whatever.
oh yeah, that's very reasonable.
Yeah, I do the same. I get shaky if I don't have food, and so there's times when I'm like, I just need a snack on me, and I would prefer the local food, but there's times if you're like on a long train or plane or something where it's like, nope, I need protein in my body right now. So
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say I have at least once bought granola bars or some version of it in the country that I was in, and that was interesting.
Ooh,
That's
fun.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, something that I just, for whatever reason, enjoy is going into local grocery stores just to see what those are like and see what things are available. I think it's an interesting little snapshot. And so, looking at, hey, I'm looking for something like a granola bar and let's see what I can find. Now, it's not going to probably have the protein content, Cheryl, that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
But and there aren't usually the 80 million options that we have here, which is too many options usually. But it still can be a fun way of kind of checking those things out and kind of doing a little bit of both.
I love it.
There you go.
It's probably similar to the fascination of looking in someone else's kitchen. I love other people's kitchens. You're like, what food do you are you not into this? Nichole, do you like seeing
in
other people's kitchens?
You collect people and then you creep in other people's kitchens?
I used to babysit a lot, and one of my favorite things was it was just fascinating to me, like, what food do people keep in their pantry? Like, what leftovers do they have? It's so interesting being like, how do you, like, I think it's just such an interesting part of living is food. And so
I'm such not a food person. Like I never would have thought about that at all.
Funny. And then in another country, when I've been in people's homes in other countries, it's like 10 steps more interesting of like, what food do they keep in their kitchens and how do they cook? Just like in everyday life, not like a special meal, but just like breakfast. What are you eating? And then, grocery stores in other countries are fun too. But that's so funny. I feel like you would have been interested by that, but apparently not. Just grocery stores.
Creeping in other people's kitchens. Nope, not interested in that.
I mean, I would not put the word creeping on there.
I'm just going to, hi, thank you for inviting me to your home. Can I see in your fridge? How is that not creepy?
I mean, it's usually like if I'm helping them cook, and then it's like, oh, this is interesting. I'm not just like poking around, So.
But see, you also like to cook. That's something that you've talked about that you'll do when you go into like if someone is hosting you, you'll offer to cook a meal for them.
Yes.
That makes a little bit more sense. Whereas you don't want me to cook a meal for you. So,
well, like
they'll never have me back.
One of my favorite food experiences in another country was when I was in Spain and I was staying with this young woman, and we were like going back to her apartment before going out somewhere else, and so I think she was like trying to have like really good food for me, but then it was just kind of like, we just need a go-to meal right now, which was so fun seeing like just what's her go-to. And I think like her grandma grew up somewhere in South America, so like it was just like rice and tomato sauce and an egg that she did, but she did it in this way that was so good, and the tomatoes over in Valencia are like amazing. And so she just did this thing that was like just a quick whip this thing up that now like is one of my favorite like little go-to snacky things. And like it was influenced by different cultures for her, and it was like so simple but like also just really different. And so I don't know, that was a really special food experience that was just like in someone's kitchen with like a 20-something person. So yeah, it can be good. Ryan's not convinced.
Food's just not my thing. Food doesn't get me excited the way it gets you excited. So I don't think it's a bad experience. I think that's a really cool way of exchanging culture, because I think food is an important part of culture, right? And like it definitely, there's differences, and I think there's exciting things you can do with food. But like, I just don't get as excited about it as you do. That's all.
Oh, man.
All right, Nichole, what travel story are you going to be telling us about today?
Oh, well, I will be telling you about, I guess, cool things you can do in Kenya.
Kenya?
And why?
And why? Oh, because I lived there for 14 years. And got to
well, there you go then.
Lots of fun adventures.
So tell us about like what ages you lived there and why were you living there?
My parents were missionaries. So we moved to Kenya in 1997 when I was a 4-year-old. So I lived there until I was 18 and moved to the States for university. All
right. Now, pretty much all I know about Kenya is that it's in Africa.
That's true. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. I got 1 point out of probably 20. I know this only because I'm cheating and looking at the map. It looks like maybe the capital is Nairobi.
Very good.
Okay. But that's in one part of the country. Where in Kenya did you live?
I lived in Nairobi. That's where I grew up.
And does Kenya have, is the country very similar as you go from one part of the country to the other, or does it have different regions that have really unique characteristics? Kind of what's the big picture of Kenya?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about it is it's a pretty small country, but it's incredibly diverse. So Nairobi itself is a beautiful city, just and full of diversity. It's kind of the hub of East Africa in a lot of ways. So a lot of cultural diversity, and it's 6,000 feet above sea level.
Oh, wow.
So you're on the equator, so it's like perfect summertime all year round. So it's pretty blissful.
That sounds fantastic.
Okay, but if you're at 6,000 feet, it's probably not blistering hot, is it?
No, that's why it's so nice. It's like t-shirt weather all year round for the most part. There's some rainy seasons where it gets chilly.
Give me a temperature, and you can give it to me in Celsius. That's totally fine.
I'd be thinking 70s. And then when it's chilly, it would be in probably the high 60s. On some hot days, it could be in the 80s, but it's pretty moderate.
And that's pretty much all year round?
Yeah, for the most part.
Oh, that is ideal.
It's amazing. Yeah. So you have to think about it. So, I mean, Kenya's on the equator. So pretty much every place you're in is going to have about the same weather all year round. So there's Nairobi, and then you can go to the Aberdares, which are in the mountains, which is one of my favorite places. And that's going to be chilly. It'll be in like the 60s and 50s. And just really lush. It's beautiful, very different from other parts of Kenya. You have the coast, which has beautiful white sand beaches where you can go snorkeling. It's really humid and hot. So think like Texas humid. But you're on the ocean, and the Indian Ocean is amazing. It's
really
warm. So you can almost bathwater warm. But
really?
Yeah, so really nice.
Wonderful.
And then you have the desert. So in northern Kenya, on the border of the South Sudan, Kenya border, is all desert. So very flat, very hot. So you're in the hundreds. There's not much green in that area. And then there's also the Masai Mara. So that's where all the animals are. Kenya has the greatest variety of wildlife in the world. So
really?
Yeah, so it's got everything. I'm a very big Kenya fan.
Awesome. Is that typically where a lot of people go on, like, do the safari thing where they get to go? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, where you see those, like, crossings over the river when all the wildebeest go and the crocodiles eat them. Yeah.
I love those videos.
That's there.
So those animals and that atmosphere, that climate was not where you were living, but it was close by?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we went there about every year growing up.
Wow.
And there's lots of other game parks as well nearby. So there's even a game park in Nairobi, which is, it was about 45 minutes from where I lived. So yeah, there's a lot to see.
Did you live in like a city outside of Nairobi, or a little town or a village, or like what was the size of where you were at specifically?
Nairobi is a very big city. I don't know the population off my head. But yeah, you could. Yeah, but I lived in the city.
6.54 million people.
Oh, perfect.
There you go.
But when I moved there was only a few shopping centers. But by the time I left, it's very developed. There's things that aren't developed, but it's not like you don't really think of like country village. Like Nairobi's it's a big city.
Okay.
So yeah, but I did have monkeys in my backyard. So yeah, so it's different than what you think.
Now, when you say monkeys in your backyard, is that the way we might have squirrels in the backyard here, or is that you had pets that were monkeys that were in the backyard?
Like squirrels. So it's still funny when I hear something in the trees today, still after so many years of living outside Kenya, my automatic thought is there's a monkey in the tree rather than a squirrel or.
That makes sense though. Because I
Yeah.
think even if I lived somewhere that there weren't squirrels for years, I would still think it was a squirrel tree. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at pictures of Nairobi, and here's some American ignorance for you. I did not know that there were skyscrapers in Africa. I don't think I knew that. So
yeah.
All of Africa?
I mean, I'm trying to think of an area in Africa where it'd be like, yeah, there's probably skyscrapers there. And like,
Not South Africa.
Are there skyscrapers? I
like Cape Town or Johannesburg or something.
Okay. I mean, I also didn't know that people lived on Madagascar. So like, I don't know much about the continent of Africa. And I've been to North Africa, but like, I guess were there yeah, there was kind of a city area there, but like it was, I don't know, pretty different. I had no idea it was that developed. So here's some ignorance for you.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty common understanding, I think, especially in the States. But one that is, off in a lot of countries. So,
yeah. So, what's the dumbest question you've gotten about being, like growing up in Kenya or Africa or anything like that?
I don't really think questions are dumb because I understand when people ask them. Like if you've never been there, I understand not knowing.
Okay, that's very kind of you. But what's the dumbest person who's asked the question then?
No, I have been able to fool people into thinking that the scars on my neck were from a lion that bit me. My husband was able to convince someone that he rode a giraffe or a zebra to school every day. So,
because he grew up in a cartoon, is that why he did that? And he's from South Africa, right?
Yes, he is. Yeah, okay. So that's not Kenya. But yeah.
But I do think that in general, and I think I'm trying to remember when this happened. Maybe it was when KJ was on. Or maybe it was a separate conversation that was not related to the podcast. But I think that it's been highlighted before, at least to me, that in general, in the United States, we tend to think of Africa as one thing that's all the same, without recognizing how big it is and how very different the different countries and regions are. And so, for someone to just say, oh, I grew up in Africa and therefore, had lions, I had to fight lions, people would just assume that, yeah, okay, that makes sense because Africa has lions. When I'm going to guess, I don't actually know this, but I'm going to guess that not all parts of Africa have lions. I mean, obviously you don't have like lions roaming free in the middle of like Nairobi or something like that. But like,
it's a big continent, just like a lot of the continents. So.
This is very true.
Well, and it reminds me of when I was a child, I thought that California was a singular location. I don't think I understood the idea of like a state or a region or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my extended family lives in California, but like some in the Bay Area, some in LA. So like that's pretty far apart. But in my mind, when we'd go to California to see them, it was like California is one place. And like, so we'd be in San Jose, but in my mind, that's like also where Disneyland is and also where everybody lives. And so, and that was when I was in elementary school. But this is like, as an adult, I think we can still kind of have those types of things of like, even people like refer to African as a language or things like that. And so I think we can kind of hold on to those pieces. And I mean, it's very gracious of you to say, like, if someone hasn't been there, but also like we know so much about like countries in Europe, you know, or other things like that. And so I think there's a little bit of like a imbalance of our knowledge, maybe when it comes to different areas of the world. And I'm a part of that. So,
well, I think even almost connected to your questions in the beginning, I think when people choose to be a tourist in an African country, I think in some ways it's pretty important that you do your research, even like brief historical research on the country, because in some ways you could come back with a lot of misconceptions. If you go to a place, for instance, if you go to a country and you see a lot of poverty, I remember talking to a woman who said, I just don't understand why Africans don't help themselves, which was very, very offensive to me. Yeah. But it was her going to this place and seeing poverty and thinking, why can't they be like America? You know, why can't they they do this? Yeah. And without understanding the history of a lot of these countries and understanding colonialism and a lot of the suffering that's happened, having an informed perspective on these things. So I guess going to a place like Kenya or anywhere really in Africa, I think it really does well to do a little bit of historical research so that as you build this framework of your understanding of place, you do it correctly, I guess. Here I am again going, so there's a right way to do things, but making sure your building blocks are actually accurate, fact-based? I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's valid though, is because maybe there may be multiple right ways, but that doesn't mean that there aren't wrong ways. Right? Like there can be things that are incorrect, right? Based on things that aren't facts. There are generalities that you can make and apply when it's not appropriate. There are things that are just downright rude and disrespectful. But I think you're right though too, is that I think we all have those tendencies and all have those in some area in our life. And it's just a matter of kind of going back to what you said earlier, being humble enough to recognize that about ourselves and being willing to do that learning as we're going to those places, which is really hard to do.
So you grew up in the city in Nairobi.
I did.
And what was school like? What was just like transportation like in the city? What was life like there for you?
Well, it changed a lot over the course of 14 years. Like it's, again, like because Kenya's developed so much so quickly, like different phases just were so different. For traffic, for instance, if you're talking about transportation, it used to be that you could get places pretty easily in a car or by public transport, where now a place that could otherwise take me 5 minutes has taken us over an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
So just because the city has grown and people are buying cars, but it's hard in some ways for the infrastructure to catch up with that. So the roads, lots of roads construction as the city continues to grow. So there's that. I was homeschooled, and there are more and more schools, I think, have also continued to emerge in the city. But when we first came, that was what my parents thought was best for me. So, and my family interacted pretty much just with Kenyans for the most part for a lot of my childhood. So I was the only white girl in my church. It was actually pretty funny. I was a homeschooler on the one hand, and then like because I wasn't interacting with a lot of other Americans, my parents had me go to youth group when I was in high school because I was nervous about talking to white teenagers. So I had quite a few quirks. Yeah.
So how did they find a youth group? Was there one in your area that had and was it Americans or just English speaking people or?
It was through one of the missionary schools. So there are like some international schools and schools that were designed for missionary families. So I got grouped in one of those, which was a great thing. So that was helpful.
And what language or languages were you speaking?
Well, Kenya has, I think, about 40 tribes, and they each have their own language. So they call it a mother tongue. So if you think about all those tribes all speaking their own languages, it's like most people tend to be trilingual, it seems. But Swahili and English are the national languages. So I learned Swahili, but I think what tends to be the embarrassment of a lot of Western kids who grow up in former British colonies is that because English tends to be spoken in the cities, or a lot of people tend to know it, we don't learn the local languages as well as like kids who grow up in former French colonies or Ethiopia. So I learned Swahili, but not nearly as well as I would have liked. But it's nice to be a tourist. If you go to Kenya, it's not too hard to get around because a lot of people speak English in the cities.
And what sorts of activities did you like to do there? Or like you mentioned, getting to go to the to like do a safari at is it game? What's the word for the type of
game park?
That is. Thank you. Yes. That was, so like what other outings did you do? What else did you enjoy doing?
Well, I loved those safaris. I mean, they're amazing. I never realized like what a privilege it was really until moving away. And, people might do one safari in a lifetime. So those are incredible. But there's, lots of mountains. I loved hiking. So there was this sleeping volcano called Mount Loganat, which we would climb fairly regularly. Really beautiful.
Ooh.
Wait, we're going to need to hear more about this because I like hiking and Ryan likes volcanoes.
Yeah, it's this dusty mountain. So you could do it in a day. So it's not like, some of these mountains in Washington where you need to camp overnight.
Okay.
Yeah. I think once I hiked there and I think I counted 8 snakes. There were a lot of snakes.
Really?
Yeah. And it's pretty hot. It's in one of the hotter parts of Kenya, but lots of fun. Yeah. So that's Loganat. There was a giraffe center in town that a lot of people would go feed the giraffes, or an elephant orphanage. People could go pet the elephants.
Center?
Mm-hmm.
Elephant orphanage?
Oh my goodness. Were these was it like a little zoo type of place, or do they have a lot of land, or what was that like?
Yeah, they were fenced off, but then like the giraffe center, they had this tall wooden platform building where people could go and feed the giraffes. So that was always fun. Tourists did it. It was a very touristy thing, both of those things, but it was really fun. So I always enjoyed it.
So you talked a little bit about being homeschooled, but what was like outside of school? What was your day-to-day life like? And it sounds like, again, things changed. So maybe even talk about some of those changes that you observed over time while you were there over the 14 years. You talked a little bit about traffic changing, but what were some of the other things that you saw outside as you saw Nairobi growing and all of that?
Yeah, well, lots more buildings. So there were a few skyscrapers when we first moved, and a lot more there now. There were no fast food restaurants when we first arrived, and now I think there's like a Kentucky Fried Chicken, which people go on for nice dates.
Okay.
I think there might be a Subway, so things have changed in that way as well. There's a funny joke. I don't think it's true, but there used to be a rumor that Taco Bell tried to start something in Kenya, but taco means your butt. So the story goes that no one, they went out of business because no one wanted to go to Butt Bell. So,
I mean, that does make sense.
That's like how the Nova didn't do well in Spanish-speaking countries.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true. Actually,
Why?
I bet it isn't. But
Nova means it doesn't go.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
Yeah, they didn't think that through when naming a car a Nova and trying to sell it in non-English speaking countries. Butt Bell. That's funny. Now I'm just going to think of Taco Bell as Butt Bell, and I'm pretty excited about that. And you mentioned that more and more people are buying cars. So when you first moved there, was it abnormal to own a car, or was it just like families would have one car, or what was it typically like, and what did it become?
Yeah, I don't know all the reasons that there are many more cars than there were. I know, like, as Kenya or Nairobi has continued to develop and more people move from outside the country for UN purposes or trade purposes, they come and buy cars. But I guess, too, as the middle class has grown, more people are buying cars. I'm not an expert on this. I probably shouldn't be talking about why more cars have occurred. But it's something I noticed.
So as a 4-year-old, when you moved there, you weren't like analyzing the economy or anything? It's pretty
no,
weird.
I wasn't. Yeah.
Okay, I love animals so much. Okay, you had monkeys in your backyard and you had snakes on a hike.
Mm-hmm.
Any other fun animal encounters that would be different than from where we live here?
Oh, well, we would go camping by the river, and there were times that once these ostriches came and were like swimming with us. So they were just hanging out in the water, drinking and taking their own bath, I guess, while we were playing in the river. So we were a little bit scared. Like, what do we do? Ostriches are very fast.
Big, right?
Yeah, they're big birds. Yeah. And then, camping in that same area, like hippos went through our campsite.
Ooh.
Yeah, which are also very big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're vicious.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you do not want to be on a hippo's bad side.
Were they pretty chill, though, when you saw them?
We were in our tents at the time, that particular time. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so hippos, crocodiles. There was once we were on Lake Baringo, which has lots of hippos and crocodiles. And we were in this boat, and my hand was just trailing in the water. And this crocodile came up and swam alongside the boat. And I was little at the time, and my hand like stroked the length of his back. Like, I think I was stunned as I didn't realize, like, suddenly I was like, my hand was on the back of his crocodile. So I'm very thankful that, I still have my hand. So that was one of the more bizarre things that happened. So it's, funny encounters like that, which haven't happened to me since moving to the U.S.
I mean, I could see that.
Oh, you pet a crocodile. Oh, that's so funny.
Of course, Cheryl thinks of it as petting a crocodile.
Well, I mean, that's a fun thing to use in Two Truths and a Lie, I think. You accidentally pet a crocodile.
There you go.
Keep it in my pocket.
Yeah. So Nichole, I'm curious, what are one or two things that you wish people knew or understood about Kenya or Nairobi specifically?
Oh, I guess going back to even that lady's comment that I was telling you about of people's assumption that like Kenya may be a more poor country because people are lazy or they don't know how to run a country or, all of these assumptions. When Kenyans are the most resilient people I know, like they're incredible. But I guess I always wish they knew the history of like colonialism and like a country that only gained its freedom in the 60s and just the complexity of Africa in general and Kenya in particular. So yeah, I think that's something that I would really love for people to grow in.
I mean, I can definitely grow in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we do that with people that we say like, sometimes well, you don't know that person's story and so you can't really judge. But I think we can do that with countries too, and say like, you don't know their story. So yeah, I think that's an important thing. It's an important reason to learn history. That's for sure.
Yeah, I am definitely a believer in history teachers. So.
So what components about Kenya's history do you feel like are the things that are the most insightful to what Kenya is like today?
I think, there's lots of things, but one significant thing is thinking that Kenya is made up of, like I said, around 40 tribes. And traditionally, before colonization, people didn't view themselves as Kenya or as a unified group, but tribes are really significant in a lot of African culture. And so people would probably, at least historically, see themselves like, first I'm a Luo, then I'm a Kenyan, or first I'm a Kikuyu, then I'm a Kenyan. And there's been some history of a lot of tribalism. And so if you think about that, and then you think of the West coming and colonizing these countries or these places, these regions, and them largely cutting these countries into areas and saying, okay, this is Kenya. And you've decided that this is a group of people who should now work together when they've never seen themselves as that unified people. You're going to have a very different result than if people had formerly seen themselves as a group of people or a unified whole. So, and I think like a lot of incredible things have happened as Kenyans have pressed into that unity. But that's pretty significant. Yeah, if you group these people together and say, okay, now cooperate as a country, you're gonna struggle. And, thinking about, in a lot of these countries, when colonization was in power, education wasn't really given to a lot of locals. And so then again, if you say, all right, you're a country, now figure this out, you have to work in this worldwide economy, in this worldwide system. You have to play by our rules in a sense, but they haven't been given the tools to play that game necessarily in the past. So I think it's pretty incredible when countries do like pursue education in these different things, but it's pretty difficult. It's like you have to play a game of catch up. So those are all things to keep in mind, I guess, when you think about poverty. Just one small component.
Yeah, for sure. That's very well said. So if someone wanted to visit Kenya,
hypothetically, Cheryl.
Yeah. And
randomly pulling a person.
What are some things like just experiences, touristy things like that you say, well, you have to do these things. And then what are things they could do to get the local experience?
Well, you would really need to go on a safari. And the Masai Mara is just one of the greatest places. So And I, in particular, am a big fan of Perini Lion Camp. So Porini. They give the best safaris ever. So doing that.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what do they do that's different?
Well, they have access to a special conservancy. So there's the Masai Mara, which is open access to a lot of different tourist agencies. But then this smaller section, only a few companies are allowed to go on it. So you get a quieter experience, and you tend to see a lot more animals, go on a lot more game drives. So usually, like, we'd go before the sun was up, then a morning one, then an afternoon one, and then a night drive as well. So it's amazing.
Wow.
And the food's
That's
incredible.
Cool.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
Wait, so a safari, again, here's my ignorance, is a whole all-inclusive experience?
yeah, it depends on the company you go with. So you can go to the Masai Mara and you can camp. So you can do it your own way. And people do that. But especially if you're a tourist and you want the full experience, I would, if you can, I would pay the money and go to a place like Perini, which I think is definitely worth it. So, and then, they have guides, and you go in these really cool Land Rovers or Land Cruisers that are all open. So it's open air. You get to go up really close to the animals. So just amazing experience. Yeah. So if you make your way to Kenya, that's very important.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm seeing on the Perini website, it says, escape from the tourist trail and opt for a more authentic safari holiday when choosing your Masai Mara accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So is Masai Mara a company or a style of safari?
Masai Mara is a game park.
It was the location. That's the name of the...
That's the location.
Yeah.
And then Perini is a company that does an exceptional safari experience.
Exactly. Yes. So
I'm looking at pictures on their website and getting very distracted. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, this looks like a fancy safari.
Yeah. And for, my family was always able to get resident rates. So I don't even know what the tourist rates are for non-residents.
Oh, nice.
But it's an expensive thing, but I don't know, people who do it for once in a lifetime, like I would definitely highly recommend it. Yeah. So, but there's also less expensive things. Like there's smaller game parks that you can go to if you have a friend, or, go in their car and go through these different game parks. There's Amboseli, Nakuru, Naivasha. So there's, so many places to see animals. Like I said, I mean, there were monkeys in my backyard. So, yeah. Yeah. And then the coast is pretty wonderful as well. Like I said, the Indian Ocean is, just pretty wonderful there. The snorkeling's great. And Kenyan coastal food is some of my favorite food in the world. So they make incredible Swahili curries. That's pretty great.
What is that?
Well, you probably know what curries are.
Curry. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Swahili is the name of a tribe. And there's a lot of them and on the coast, and their cooking has influenced a lot of just the coastal communities. So lots of delicious seafood.
Oh, yay. So
now you got Cheryl interested.
I'm looking at the coast of Kenya right now, and I'm seeing Mombasa, looks like the biggest city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the biggest
coast.
port city.
So would you recommend, so like experiencing the coast of Kenya, do you go to Mombasa? Do you do the big city thing? Or do you go like little town somewhere else on the coast? Or what's the best coast experience?
Our favorite place is to go to Watamu. So Watamu. Which is about, I think it's 30 minutes. I might be off, but just away from Mombasa. So I think they tend to have a really nice beach and it tends to be safer as well. So, yeah. But I mean, we've gone to Mombasa as well, which is also fantastic. So it's just a great coast in general, in my opinion.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's fun to walk around the communities there as well. So you were talking about what things you could do to get a local experience. But like Mombasa is, has had a lot of cultural history as a port city. And there's some Arab influence. So it's a fun place to walk around as well. Very hot. You don't want to walk around too long, then you want to go in the ocean, but it's a fun place.
All right, Nichole, well, thank you so much for sharing about growing up in Nairobi with us. We have a couple questions for you. So the first is based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You. If you could take us with you to just one thing we'll say in all of Kenya, what would it be and why?
Oh, well, there is an experience that I really love that I would think would be wonderful to share with people is in northern Kenya, in Turkana. So that's in the desert. It's a very rural part of Kenya. And it's flat and very hot. But at night, the skies are just the most amazing skies I've ever seen. So you lie on your back and you feel like you're inside an upside down bowl just filled with stars. So you see shooting stars, and it's completely quiet because there is nothing loud nearby. Like the planes are too high up to hear them. There's no cars or vehicles of any kind. People do have cell phones there now, so every once in a while you'll hear them playing their ringtones. But but that's just a pretty breathtaking experience.
That's so cool.
Okay, when are we going?
Ryan teaches an astronomy class, so he's a big star fan.
Oh, yeah, it's a pretty wonderful place to see the stars.
Yeah.
And I think on this podcast, we've heard about a couple really special places in the world for stargazing. So Ryan, I think you might need to just start like a star list or something.
What do you mean start?
Okay, maybe we need to post it because I feel like that could be a fun thing. Like, what have we heard about for like our top stargazing locations in the world? And this might make that list. Especially when it comes to no noise. I like that because I feel like that is part of the enjoyment of, well, just nature in general. But, like stars is just like that silence as well.
Yeah.
So I like that.
And because obviously it's nighttime when you're seeing the stars. So are there many nocturnal animals that are very active out there that make like any noises at all? Or is it even just, there's just nothing?
Well, in that part of Kenya, there's like nothing but snakes and goats. So not much in that particular region.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, man. And this next question, we always ask. It's a little bit sad right now, but we'll try to make it happy. What's your next trip? Or if you don't have one, because a lot of us don't, what do you hope your next trip will be?
Well, I am I'm hoping to begin exploring my new home. So I'm really just wanting to get to know Washington a little bit more. So hopefully
so
get
just
to
outdoors.
do some travel
Outdoors
around.
is your next trip then?
Yeah, make it past, past the yard. So that would be great.
I think that's a great goal for right now.
I love that. That is a very practical one too. That's some big dreams for all of us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Nichole, do you have any travel questions for us?
Yeah, I am curious about, like, are there any particular places that you guys have decided you for sure want to go to after talking to people on this podcast?
Boy,
All of the places.
I know, all of them. Okay, so we've talked about. We were asked this question, but it was like maybe a year ago. So I I feel like I'm trying to think about what I said at the time and what I would say now even, I mean, we have had several guests now talk about different countries in Africa, and I've only been to North Africa. And as I hear about more people's experiences, I'm saying like I need to go to that. Like I have this idea of like, oh, I want to go to all 7 continents, and I've already checked Africa off my list, which is that collector side of me, right? And so, but I want to explore more of that continent. I would love to visit other countries in Africa, and so and I feel like because of this podcast, just starting to learn about them and what distinguishing factors are in different countries or different regions, and so I gotta go there. Also, I love penguins a lot, so I do need to see penguins on the beach. And did your husband grow up near penguins on the beach?
He did. Yeah. Saw those penguins all the time.
So, like you were saying, like monkeys are kind of like squirrels. Are penguins like seagulls down there then?
In certain areas.
Or is it more special?
I think they're more special. So, yeah.
Okay.
They're pretty fun to watch.
Oh my goodness. I want to see a penguin on the beach. It sounds great. Oh, nice. How about you, Ryan?
Oh, it's really hard because I think there are a lot of places that I would like to go. Well, I mean, I think the most obvious one that we've talked about a bunch is Spain, and specifically Barcelona, because Spain was never on my list as a place that had anything that I thought I was all that interested in. And then there have been a lot of Spain episodes on this podcast, so I've learned a lot more about Spain, partly because Cheryl loves Spain and has been there a million times. So I think that's a place that's on my list that didn't used to be. I think Japan is a place that I'm interested in going, and I wasn't before. Because it sounds like there's some really cool stuff. Again, a lot of it, for the most part, I think Cheryl and I have talked about this before, although I don't know how much of it has been on a podcast and how much of this has just been separate. One of the things that's cool about having guests on and sharing their experiences is we get to learn about specifics about these places. And once we learn more of those specifics, it's like, oh, now I'm interested in that place. But before it was just a name, it was just a city or maybe an iconic picture or a whatever. And so if I don't know very much about it, I'm not interested, not because I don't think it's cool, but just because there's nothing about it that I know to be interested about. So for example, I don't like hot weather. I don't like being hot. As soon as you said that Nairobi is at 6,000 feet, all of a sudden I got really excited because it's like, and when I think of Africa, I think of hot, which is something that makes me less interested in going there because I just don't like to be hot. But there are parts of Africa that maybe aren't super hot all the time. I was like, that would be cool. That could be my entry. And I probably wouldn't just stay there. I'd probably go to other places that are hot because there's cool things that you can experience there. But, things like that, as I learn more details, I get more interested and more excited about more places. And ironically, yesterday I was looking at, so I've done a number of trips with students from my school, because I think the travel is awesome and I'd love to take students on trips. And so I was getting, I don't know, antsy, itchy, jealous, wishing I was traveling. I'm not sure. And so I just started pulling up different travel websites of different science-focused trips. And one of the places that came up actually was Kenya. So I was actually looking at Kenya yesterday and kind of looking at, I wonder what that would be like. There's no price on it, unfortunately. And I'm guessing it would be pretty expensive because just to get there is not cheap. Which, how long does it take to fly there?
Oh, well, I always ended up having to fly to London first or some part of Europe, which would be about 10 hours. And then flying down was usually an 8-hour flight. So it could end up, usually a 24-hour journey. I've never flown from Washington. That's even further. So, yeah.
Well, except it's not really, because we're so far north in Seattle. You can do Seattle to London in about 8.5 hours.
Really? Oh,
because we
that's a
go
big
up and over the
perk.
pole. So we don't go straight across the country. We actually get to cheat and go up over Canada, go over Hudson Bay, and then come down.
Oh,
So
that's exciting.
it actually worked pretty cool to get to Europe from here.
Man, that's good to know. I'm excited.
Yay, Seattle for the win.
Also, it's really funny. Flights to Nairobi are free right now from New York, or at least they were a week ago. That's because of
What? They were free.
Yeah, it's because I think they needed to pick up people that were in Nairobi, probably American citizens, to bring them back. But it was free to go there. So if you wanted to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
For how long? Can you book out like a year in advance?
I don't think so. I think they're just for the time being. That would be nice.
They're like, anyone want to go on a plane anywhere?
Flights have gotten cheaper though over the years. And so I don't know. It's not quite as intimidating as I think people might always feel.
Cool. Well, that was a long answer to your question, and I don't know if I actually directly answered it, but it was a good question.
Oh, yay.
Okay, so we're going to transition into the last segment, which we have slightly modified in this stay home sort of world that we're living in right now. And we're calling it Wish You'd Stay Home. And during this section, each of the three of us is going to highlight some sort of virtual attraction that we can enjoy from home, since right now we're really not doing much traveling. So, Nichole, do you have a good wish you'd stay home for us today?
Yeah. Mine has mostly been reading. So that's not necessarily going anywhere virtually. But I did just buy Americana by, I don't want to butcher her name, but I bought Americana, which is written by a Nigerian author. So,
cool.
I'll be taken to, actually, I think it's about the US. It's not even about Nigeria, but I've been doing a lot of reading, which is great because I usually, was hoping to go hiking on the weekends. So having this chance to read a lot more has been fun.
It's a very positive outlook.
Yeah, I have definitely done more reading since things have closed down. I listened to 1.5 audiobooks, one of them because I got it from the library and it expired before I finished it. I've read from start to finish, like a real actual paper book. Wow. And I just started another book this last weekend, which is ridiculous for me. I think I have done more reading in the last 1.5 than I did all of last year. So that's a great tip.
Nice.
Cheryl, what's your wish you'd stay home?
Well, mine is the reason that I haven't been reading more.
Okay.
I've been playing a video game quite a lot recently.
Oh, yeah?
Uh-huh. Any guesses as to what new video game came out? That I don't know how much you're aware of what video games have come out recently.
A new video game that came out?
Yeah, like a month ago maybe, or something like that.
The only new video game that I know of is Jedi Fallen Order, but I feel like that came out more than a month ago.
And that's also not what I'm playing. So, I've been playing Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch.
That's not a new game.
Well, but a new one came out for the Switch like a little over a month ago.
Okay.
And Daryl kept telling me that I was gonna like it, and he was like, "Yeah, it's coming out soon. I think you'd really like it." And I've never played any version of it, and he's played them. He's really into video games, so but also he knows what style I would like better than I know. And let me tell you, and I've heard this from many people playing it, the timing of that game coming out could not have been more perfect, because you are on this little island, so you get to be outdoors in it. And it's lovely weather, and the weather changes sometimes. So even it was raining, and I got that rain feeling, like the good rain feeling you get when you're snuggly, and you just have friendly little animal neighbors, and you get to collect things, and you get to make it exactly what you want. So there's control in it, and there's just nice sweetness in it, and outdoors. I know it's a video game, but like there's something about it that's like kind of magical for me right now. And so it's been my happy place a little bit. It's just like, oh, I just am gonna go talk to my animal neighbors, and and you get to there's no social distancing needed in it, which is really nice too. And so
that does sound like a very Cheryl game.
Yeah, it's just lovely. And then Daryl's been playing the new Final Fantasy game, so we're playing very different games right now. But and I think he would probably recommend that. But oh my goodness, I would definitely recommend Animal Crossing. It's just oh man, it's just lovely right now. So, and I've heard from other people playing it too. They're like, wow, it couldn't have been better timing, like during quarantine, to have this sweet little game. So,
yeah.
How about you, Ryan?
So my wish you'd stay home today is, well, it's kind of two levels. So first of all, it's a YouTube video from one of the YouTubers that I follow called Physics Girl. She is awesome. She obviously does physics, but she is incredibly intelligent. She went to MIT. She's a physicist. But she makes these really down-to-earth, really accessible videos. And she did one towards the beginning of this whole kind of quarantine, lockdown, whatever word you want to use, where it's called the Home Challenge, 20 easy experiments in 5 minutes for bored adults and kids at school inside. So she has 20 different really simple science experiments that you can do at home. And she tries to do all 20 of them in 5 minutes. And so she's like real quickly running like around her kitchen from this one to this one to this one, doing all these things and trying to like really briefly explain it. And then she goes to the next one. The video itself is incredibly entertaining, but then the extra layer is they're all things that you can actually do because they're done with things that you would just have around the house for the most part. There may be a few things that maybe you don't have that exact thing, but for the most part, they're things that you would have around the house. And so you could also recreate these things and do these things at home, which I know I've got a really strong bias. It's science, but it's cool. And a lot of these experiments are the things that you maybe saw when you were in elementary school or whatever. And they're the things that I think get people excited about science. Whereas I think sometimes when you get into the higher grades and things, it feels less exciting and less cool, even though the physics behind it or the chemistry or the biology or whatever is still just as interesting. Sometimes we lose sight of that. And so I think it's a really cool way to enjoy science and to be active and to try things out and to be entertained.
Yay. So I watched it when you sent it to me, and she's so fun.
Isn't she delightful?
And then I just loved that she's smart because she kind of looks like a YouTuber with like any other YouTuber. And then I'm like, oh no, but she knows what she's talking about. This is wonderful.
Oh, she really knows what she's talking about. But but she just makes it so accessible. I also really appreciate that she's a female physicist, because that's an area that is underrepresented when it comes to females traditionally. And so the fact that there could be a female role model in physics, I think is really cool too.
That's awesome.
There's just, it's great. You should go watch all of her things and subscribe.
That's so fun. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to show it to my stepson, because he and I do love to do a lot of activities at home. I'm trying to figure out then if I want to do them, because if I show it to him, then it's going to be like, all right, well now we probably need to do at least a few of these. And so I have to figure out like, do I have the materials and do I want to spend the afternoon like this? And I might, and I probably do at some point, but I think I want to be able to commit to actually being able to do those ourselves if I show it to him.
Well, and maybe what you do is you pull a couple that you think he'd be interested in, or that maybe you feel comfortable doing, because some of them involve fire and things that you might feel less comfortable with, but you just do those separate from the video and see how those go and see his level of interest. Yeah. And then maybe you could build up to watching the video.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun.
Go science.
In conclusion.
All right. Well, that's going to kind of be the end of this episode. We would love it if you would follow us on social media. We are at Timwy Podcast. That's TMWI for Take Me With You Podcast. Hopefully, Nichole will share some pictures with us from her time in Nairobi, and we'll post those on our social media account. We are on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
You can also email us at timwepodcast@gmail.com. Send us your travel stories, guest suggestions, and send us things that you wish that people knew about the place that you grew up.
You can also call us and leave us a voicemail at 406-763-8699. Or if that's a little bit easier to remember, 406-POD Timwy. We would love it if you would rate and review our podcast on whatever you're using to listen to this right now. Subscribe to make sure that you don't miss any episodes, and share about this episode on social media so other people can learn more about Nairobi and Kenya.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. And her new dog is probably dominating that Instagram right now, too. But
Yep,
if you want to go look at her new dog, that's great. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Nichole, thank you so much for sharing about growing up in Nairobi, Kenya with us today.
Oh, thank you. This was really fun.
Yay!
All right, that's all we got. So until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. Oh, the world is up there waiting to